Thank you, multimask. If you don't mind, I'm going to answer the question in English. As much as I like your language, I could try several different languages, but we'll stick to English. The traditional model, it's easy to say that we should just get rid of most of what we've learned and done in the last 100 years, of course. And I think, as Frederic Laloux so eloquently explains, there are different paradigms on the horizon, and there's a lot of demand, grassroots demand, coming up for change in that respect. I also do agree with what Dan said, is that our education system and all our traditional large companies reinforce this traditional model. So it's quite hard to transform that. I don't think we should get rid of all of that old system, but clearly it creates a lot of pain and stress. I've been working in global business for the last 20 years, worked with lots of large companies and small ones, but especially the larger the companies get, the more pain that is inflicted upon employees. Stress, burnout, all kinds of psychological problems, psychological terror, and so on. A lot of dishonesty in those companies. And the biggest problem there is not individual, but it has a huge economic impact on the productivity and the results of those organizations. And I think people are starting to realize that in this century, we're going to have to change that. And when Laloux talks about purpose, autonomy, and wholeness, we need to find ways to translate that. And there is no easy magic bullet. There is no simple recipe to do that. We like to look at organizations as a temple where you need to work on strong foundations. Strategy has already been referred to, and culture as really important foundations. The leadership component that you're talking about, but also very important is let's think about ways to make things more simple. What we see a lot is that most organizations are trying to tackle complexity by organizing more complexity internally. And so, as a result, we make it worse. So what we need is simplification. And I really loved Dominic's introduction this morning, and he said, stay proudly small. I think that's part of the recipe, is organizing as teams, as Alexander has also already referred to in his introduction, is make sure that we give people the means to act as human beings in smaller teams and take ownership of part of the business, so that they are not a small number in a huge machine, but that they can still feel that we can be proudly small and have an impact.
Can you share with us a specific example on some actions that one of the organizations with which you worked took to implement these changes?
Yeah, I brought an example of a medium-sized company, about 100 people, architecture and engineering company, is kind of reasonable fit. And what we see with these kinds of companies is two big issues. At one stage they were a startup, and they had this huge entrepreneurial spirit, and they've lost that. They're growing by 15-20% every year, very successful, and in the process they lose something. They lose this original spirit, and they see that they start to lose the engagement of their people. And so what they wanted to do is how can we again tap into the energy and the talents of all the people they have, because they've got a bunch of engineers and architects, very smart people. They really want to have an impact on the world, but somehow it's starting to fall asleep. And so basically what they were trying to do at that stage is try to copy bad examples of big companies. And as a result, they were becoming a big company with a lot of structure, with lots of silos, with lots of layers and management and functions in separate...
On meetings.
It's terrible. And they were adding more complexity. And so basically the most important thing they did is, first off, ask themselves the question, what do we want to be? Because if you try to tackle the whole world, and then you let all the complexity of the entire world enter your company. So that's the first part of the solution. Decide where you want to go, And then it becomes a little bit more simple for people to understand what we are here for. The second thing they did is think about how can we create smaller groups of people that can take ownership of parts of that complex problem, of all those customers and orders and requests from the external market, and thereby create entities that have flow and full ownership of what happens. And finally, and very importantly, is that they created small cells, and they've made a really nice drawing of it that looks almost like biological cells. And essentially, they've created a simple structure that in this bigger 120 people company, all of a sudden, smaller cells and teams can take full end-to-end ownership of the business. And they feel like a small, medium-sized company within it. And that really empowers people to work with purpose, with a lot of autonomy, energy, and bring all... Yes, we see that distance in terms of countries and in terms of kilometers creates another enormous challenge. At the same time, we see that as soon as you bring people together around a common purpose and give them the autonomy to work and make results happen as a mini company, the distance doesn't matter as much. Very often we use proximity, so we put people together, we fly them into team buildings, we fly them into meetings, we do a lot of conference calls to mitigate the distance we have created in our organizations with the different silos and layers. So if you create people who have joint ownership and fully feel that we together have this objective to meet, and we love doing that together, and we need each other, the distance matters much less.
Okay.
May I offer just a 10-second thing that I really loved what Dan was saying, and I think we work a lot with business leaders and employers organizations, and I think as employers there is one thing that I find really crucial, and it is if you don't feel 100% that this is a direction your company should go in, then just forget it. It's so crucial. It's something that Lalou also mentioned, and in the course of our experience, it's the number one thing. Everything else is irrelevant. If the number one and their team are not 100% convinced that this needs to happen, then you can just forget it. You don't bother. Just keep on organizing in the same traditional way. And that's why we need people like Dan, and you need a lot of role models to show people that there is a different way. So I love that. I love the energy. Thank you.